During the live broadcast on a major network, immediately after Congresswoman Ilhan Omar asserted that Donald Trump was unfit for the Oval Office, nobody expected that minutes later she would be the one systematically dismantled by a dossier he had prepared. Trump effectively transformed what was designed as a political trap into a historic counteroffensive, exposing a series of controversies that threatened to unravel Omar's career in less than 90 minutes. That evening, the entire nation was glued to the screen, where the America Town Hall had been hyped for weeks as the ultimate political showdown. This was far more than a standard policy debate. It was the highly anticipated clash between President Trump and the freshman congresswoman, who had positioned herself as the vocal champion for underrepresented communities. The network and the press corps were convinced this night would mark the moment Trump was finally cornered regarding his hardline policies and polarizing rhetoric. They assumed Ilhan Omar, cultivating the image of a fierce and intellectual debater, would be the one to make Trump stumble in front of millions of viewers. Leading up to the event, the production crew had prepared with obsessive detail, as directors and media strategists met continuously to engineer the perfect stage. They curated an audience with a calculated demographic mix, balancing supporters and undecided voters to generate an atmosphere that would exert psychological pressure on the president. Cameras were angled to capture his every micro-expression, while a control room full of fact-checkers stood by, ready to interrupt Trump the moment he made a factual error on air. The network believed that, with this elaborate setup, they would score a ratings sensation while cementing Ilhan Omar's status as the icon of a new generation challenging the old guard. Backstage, the vibe between the two camps could not have been more different. Omar's green room was packed with aides, communication experts, attorneys, and image consultants. Everyone clutched binders and laptops, frantically exchanging talking points and strategic phrases for her to deploy during the broadcast to catch him off balance. Omar sat before a vanity mirror adjusting her bright red hijab, a color deliberately selected to project confidence and symbolize power against the debate's backdrop. Her coaches repeatedly reminded her to maintain her composure and smile through his attacks, assuring her that the moderators would likely tilt the field in her favor. Despite the prep, Omar's eyes held a flicker of anxiety, though it was masked by the belief that she was about to make history by taking down the president. In stark contrast, across the hallway, Donald Trump appeared with an eerie calmness, completely devoid of the chaotic energy often ascribed to him. There was no entourage, no commotion, and no frantic advisors. It was just him, a soda, and a worn leather binder marked with yellow, sticky notes. Trump sat flipping through the pages, occasionally chuckling as if reviewing a script he had already memorized, treating the high-stakes event as just another day at the office. For him, this showdown was not a trap, but a golden opportunity to bypass media filters and speak directly to the American people without interpretation. For years, he had been the target of relentless media attacks, particularly from figures like Omar, whom he viewed as the embodiment of political aggression without accountability. Now, he had the chance to respond in his preferred manner, directly, forcefully, and without apology. Precisely at 8 p.m., the studio lights surged, and hundreds of audience members rose to applaud as Omar made her entrance. She smiled radiantly, waving to the crowd, projecting confidence with every stride as the stage lights made her red scarf pop against the blue backdrop. Moments later, the applause intensified as Donald Trump appeared, clad in his signature dark suit and long red tie, wearing an unwavering smile of supreme confidence. He walked out deliberately, pausing to acknowledge the crowd, before settling into the chair opposite Omar. The air in the studio instantly grew heavy, as if two colliding worlds and ideologies were about to crash into each other before a national audience. Moderator Jake Tapper introduced the segment, stressing the need for civil discourse, though the tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Trump offered a slight, tight-lipped smile, a mischievous glint in his eyes as he adjusted his lapel mic and took a deep breath. But before Tapper could even pose the first question, Omar interjected, her voice sharp and authoritative, seizing the initiative. "I believe the most critical thing to state up front is that President Trump does not deserve to occupy the White House, as he embodies policies that tear us apart." A buzz went through the studio as many applauded, and the cameras zoomed tight on Trump's face, which held that same unbothered expression. This was the moment the network thought they had secured a viral clip, unaware that this statement was the trigger that would reverse the entire dynamic. Trump leaned forward slightly, smiling, and responded in a tone that was warm yet heavy with implication, telling her she looked elegant, but noting they would soon discuss who truly belonged where. The comment, superficially polite, caused Omar to hesitate, realizing this was not the defensive outburst she had anticipated. Trump leaned back, rested his hand on the binder, and added that he brought a few interesting items the network might want to display. The audience murmured while Omar frowned, unable to pivot quickly enough, marking the exact moment the media narrative began to tilt against her. Trump had not come to debate abstract concepts. He arrived with the singular goal of dismantling his opponent using public records and data accumulated over years. The atmosphere felt like the stillness before a hurricane, quiet but charged with static, as the moderators exchanged nervous glances. Jake Tapper looked between the two, attempting to hold the center, but he realized he was about to referee a brawl rather than manage a conversation. From the camera angle, viewers could see Trump quietly opening his file, turning a few pages, and smiling to himself under the harsh studio lights. Neither the network executives nor Omar's extensive team suspected they were witnessing the opening tremors of a political earthquake. That night, they thought they were putting Trump on the defensive, but within minutes, the person trapped was not him, but the woman who had entered as a symbol of moral judgment. It all began with the network's hubris and the belief that a freshman politician could outmaneuver a media veteran who had survived countless public battles. They forgot one crucial detail. Donald Trump was not just a politician. He was a master of television who knew instinctively how to bring a room to his side. Tonight, he was prepared to demonstrate that skill to the entire world. As soon as the host concluded the intro, the tension in the room spiked to a fever pitch. Ilhan Omar, striking in her red scarf and holding a steady gaze, proactively took the floor before a question was even asked. She didn't wait for a prompt or an introduction. From the very first second, Omar launched a frontal assault. She declared it was time for America to face the truth that President Trump was unfit to sit in the White House. She labeled him a symbol of division, who spent his term attacking immigrants and people who looked like her. The auditorium rang with applause, interspersed with whistles of approval, which seemed to embolden her further. Omar smiled with self-assurance, thinking she had just scored the opening point in front of millions of viewers. Jake Tapper glanced at the director via the monitor, signaling that they had captured excellent footage for the highlight reel. It seemed like a golden moment. A young immigrant congresswoman daring to stand up and dress down a powerful president on live TV. Omar knew she was being filmed in close-up, so she slowed her cadence, articulating every syllable so that each word landed like a prepared political message. She continued, claiming he didn't just attack her, but the very values America is supposed to uphold, such as diversity and tolerance. She insisted they could not remain silent and allow a man of his character to represent the nation. The section of the audience supporting Omar clapped enthusiastically, with several standing to record the moment on their phones. Backstage, her team exchanged smiles, convinced the script was playing out exactly as they had simulated. The network had hoped for this precise energy, a strong, emotional opening that evoked empathy and would force Trump to stumble under public scrutiny. They assumed he would lose his cool, react harshly as he often did, and reinforce the caricature of an impulsive president unable to regulate his emotions. But in the opposite chair, Donald Trump sat perfectly still, his hands clasped, a faint smirk playing on his lips. His eyes didn't show anger, but rather intense observation, as if he were waiting for the perfect opening to strike back. When Omar concluded with the line calling him the shame of America, the room erupted in cheers. Immediately, the camera cut to Trump, and the studio fell into a hush, waiting to see the explosion. Trump tilted his head slightly, his voice warm and laced with a touch of sarcasm, yet remarkably steady. He thanked her, complimented her appearance, and noted that the red scarf suited her very well. Scattered laughter rippled through the auditorium, effectively diffusing the tension. He then continued, noting that while she claimed he didn't belong in the White House, perhaps they should have a serious conversation about who truly didn't belong. That sentence made Omar pause, her smile faltering as her eyes betrayed a flash of confusion. Jake Tapper prepared to interrupt to pivot the topic to immigration policy, but Trump continued as if he were the one running the show. Before addressing policy, he stated that the American people needed to be reminded of things she had said, which many found deeply insulting. Trump raised a hand to signal, and instantly the large screen behind him queued up a video. It was an archived clip of Omar speaking at a fundraising event where she discussed the aftermath of September 11th. Her voice echoed through the studio, saying that some people did something, and that all of us started losing our civil liberties. The video cut to black, and the space fell into a heavy silence as Trump looked around the room and slowly repeated her words. He emphasized the vague phrasing she used to describe a cataclysmic tragedy, letting the words hang in the air. He paused, his voice suddenly dropping to a somber, serious register as he recalled being in New York that day. He described seeing the smoke, the rubble, and the flyers for missing loved ones plastered on every wall. He noted that more than 3,000 Americans were murdered, yet she referred to them merely as some people. A murmur of unease rose from the audience, and Omar's face tightened. She attempted to interject to explain her meaning, but Trump steamrolled over her. He cut in, his voice ringing clear, telling her she didn't grasp how New Yorkers felt when hearing her speak like that. He reminded everyone she was welcomed by America at age 12 and protected here, yet spoke with indifference about the day thousands were slaughtered. He asked if he was the one who didn't deserve the White House, suggesting Americans should ask who really didn't belong. A burst of unexpected applause broke out, not just from Trump loyalists, but from the neutral bloc as well. The camera panned to Omar, who pressed her lips together in an effort to remain composed, but she was visibly rattled. In a few short minutes, the momentum had violently shifted in the other direction. The network had intended to stage a battle where Omar was the prosecutor, but Trump had turned that very attack into a fierce counter-opportunity. Omar tried to salvage the moment by claiming her words were taken out of context, but Trump chuckled softly and shook his head. There is no context that makes that statement acceptable, he argued, stating she couldn't minimize such a tragedy and expect people to believe she loved the country. The room was dead silent until a single person in the crowd clapped, followed by a few others, until the sound swelled into genuine applause. On Trump's face, the confident smile returned as he looked at Omar, his tone lighter but still cold. He pointed out that while she claimed he divided the country, she should look in the mirror when her words made millions feel disrespected. From backstage, Omar's team began to panic. Their prep sheets were useless against this specific line of attack. She had planned to hit Trump on emotion, but he was countering with cold facts and collective national trauma. In minutes, her advantage evaporated, and the network couldn't cut the feed because the program was live and the audience was captivated. When Jake Tapper tried to steer the conversation back to the agenda, Omar had not yet regained her footing. Trump scanned the room and stated that while he may be criticized, he always told the truth about what he believed. He declared he stood there to remind everyone that respecting the nation that gave them opportunity was a prerequisite for deserving its freedom. That was the moment the audience exploded, the applause roaring like a breaking wave. Omar sat frozen, her eyes darting. Her attack, calculated to drown Trump, had become the prelude to the fiercest counterpunch of his political life. From an accusation, he turned the stage into a platform to demonstrate patriotism, pride, and resilience. That night, with just a few opening sentences, Trump made Ilhan Omar realize she was not facing a standard politician, but a master of the stage. He understood that in the age of media, raw emotion and symbols are far more powerful than any policy accusation. Trump allowed the clip to play out fully without interruption, understanding the rhetorical power of silence. When the audio in the video ceased, he turned to the audience, his voice deepening to give weight to every syllable. He repeated the phrase, "Some people did something," highlighting how she trivialized the memory of those who died. He paused, looking directly at Omar, describing the agony he witnessed, and stating that no American could ever forget it. He spoke slowly, his tone no longer combative but solemn, even genuinely emotional. The entire auditorium was as silent as a tomb, with no one daring to speak. Trump looked up straight into the camera lens, his gaze piercing through the screen to reach millions of viewers watching at home. He pointed out that 18 years later, a member of Congress saved by this country spoke of that day as if it were a minor inconvenience. He told her clearly that those words were not just disrespectful, but an insult. Omar gripped the microphone until her knuckles turned white, trying to force a smile that looked pained and distorted. She began to explain that she didn't mean to insult anyone, her voice trembling slightly. She tried to clarify her intent, but Trump cut her off, maintaining his calm demeanor. He told her she didn't need to explain because there was no justification for indifference when people lost families. He emphasized that the country didn't need her to say, "Some people did something," but rather, "We will never forget." He concluded that speaking as if America was the problem was the real issue. Whispers rose again in the room, some nodding in agreement, as a close-up of Omar's face was shown on the monitor. Trump turned to the audience, his voice rising, taking on the cadence of a campaign rally. He reminded them she came to America at 12, was protected, and given opportunities millions only dream of. He noted the country sheltered her family from conflict and educated her. Then, having gained everything, she failed to show respect for those who fell to protect this country. That sentence caused the room to erupt in applause, with many leaping to their feet. A few scattered Omar supporters tried to react, but the applause drowned out everything. Trump stood up, reading from no papers, needing no teleprompter. He spoke as if every sentence was etched in his soul. He reminded her he was elected by millions who believed he would protect the country. He then asked her directly who truly didn't deserve to be there. A long, thunderous round of applause rang out, and Omar's confidence wavered. She opened her mouth to speak, but Trump raised a hand to signal a stop. He told her not to rush because he wasn't finished. He turned to the audience and then looked straight into the lens. He stated that those lost on 9/11 couldn't speak for themselves or fight back. "But we can," he declared, asserting that America would never allow anyone to minimize that pain. The audience stood in unison, clapping incessantly with chants of USA breaking out. While Omar sat silently, averting her gaze, Tapper tried to regain control of the program. But the audience was no longer paying attention to his moderation. All eyes were fixed on Trump, who had just turned an insult into a speech that shook the room. Trump sat down, his voice returning to a calm baseline. He told her she was the one dividing America by planting the idea that patriots were the enemy. He clarified that he loved immigrants who worked hard and respected the law. However, he stated he could not respect someone who mocked the lives lost for freedom. Omar responded weakly, claiming he was twisting her words regarding discrimination. Trump cut across, his voice hard as granite. He drew a boundary between protecting a community and insulting an entire grieving nation, telling her she crossed that line. His words fell like a sledgehammer, and once again the room erupted in cheers. Trump supporters waved miniature flags, chanting his name, as cameras panned across the stands recording images of audience members wiping away tears. In that moment, the debate ceased to be politics. It became a display of raw national emotion. As the applause gradually subsided, Trump leaned lightly against his chair, looking toward Omar with a faint, knowing smile. He told her if she wanted to debate immigration policy, he was ready, but lecturing him on patriotism was a mistake. The entire room laughed, some cheered, and in the glare of the studio lights, Omar sat silently, looking down at her hands. In just 10 minutes, the network's entire game plan had collapsed. Instead of witnessing Trump floundering, they broadcast the moment he set the studio ablaze with a spontaneous speech full of emotion and power. That night, millions of TV viewers saw not a president under siege, but a man standing up to protect America's collective memory. From the moment Trump seized on the phrase, "some people did something," the tide of the confrontation completely turned. Omar was no longer the challenger. She became the defendant in the court of public opinion, where every word and action from her past became evidence against her. After the atmosphere in the studio settled, Trump looked around as if giving the audience time to breathe after the emotional climax. He did not rush, merely taking a sip of water and leaning back, a familiar half-smile reappearing. He told Omar that perhaps the American people needed to hear a few things she had said herself. He clarified these were not things he made up, but words she wrote that the world had seen. As he finished the sentence, whispers rang out in the room. Omar frowned slightly, looking at him with suspicion. Trump signaled the tech team, and on the large screen behind him, screenshots of Twitter feeds appeared. Old tweets from Omar stood out sharply against the social network's signature blue background. The first line appeared, a tweet from 2012 regarding Israel, followed by another concerning American political support, where she infamously tweeted about it being all about the Benjamins. For a few seconds, the room was dead silent. Trump slowly stood up, pointing at the screen like a professor lecturing a student. He called it the language of hostility, not policy critique. He walked slowly closer to the screen, his voice booming stronger, emphasizing that Benjamins referred to $100 bills. He asked if her implication was that Jewish people bought politicians with cash. He labeled it one of the oldest and most dangerous anti-Semitic tropes in history. He pointed to the second tweet implying Israel had hypnotized the world, asking if she knew that was propaganda used by hate groups. Omar bit her lip, trying to stay calm, grabbing the microphone to speak quickly. She claimed she was talking about the Israeli government, not Jewish people, and that she opposed their actions. Trump raised a hand to cut her off. He stated she could oppose policy, but she could not insult an entire people. He argued that saying Jewish people use money to control things was an attack on a religious community that had been persecuted for thousands of years. He noted the irony that her own party had to condemn her twice for these statements. He returned to his chair, opening the thick file on the table, and pulled out 2 sheets of paper with the official House letterhead. He held up House Resolution 183, condemning all forms of anti-Semitism, which passed because of her. He noted it was proposed by her own party leaders as a buzz rose from the audience. Some Omar supporters booed, but many neutral viewers gasped in surprise. Trump continued, his voice dripping with sarcasm, noting how impressive it was when a party that protects its allies had to publicly criticize her. Omar tried to force a smile, claiming he was twisting the truth to divide them and that she was labeled anti-Semitic simply for being Muslim. Trump couldn't help but chuckle softly. He reminded her that in America, people aren't silenced for their religion, but they are held accountable for what they say. He paused for a beat, then turned to the audience to ask a hypothetical question. He asked what they would call him if he tweeted, "It's all about the welfare baby," when discussing programs for the poor. A few people in the room shouted, "Racist!" Trump nodded, pointing at them, agreeing that they would be right. He pointed out the double standard where her comments were called free speech, while his would be condemned. Laughter mixed with applause rang out as Omar looked around for allies. Trump returned to the dossier, turning another page, noting the list of such statements was long. He observed that every time she was questioned, she claimed people were Islamophobic. He told her that people didn't hate her religion, they just hated hypocrisy. The entire room seemed to react to the sudden verbal takedown. Trump turned to Omar, his voice slow and sharp. He told her she couldn't claim to represent justice while sowing prejudices that caused suffering. He reminded her she couldn't stand in Congress and say colleagues were hypnotized. He pointed out she was the one causing division. Omar could not answer. She just looked down at the table, hands clasped. Perhaps for the first time that evening, she felt truly cornered. Trump seized that moment to end the counterattack with a harder tone. He stated he didn't need anyone to teach him about fairness, as he had worked with people of all backgrounds his whole life. He warned that judging people by ethnicity or religion instead of actions would destroy America. He concluded that, unfortunately, that was exactly what she was doing. Once again, applause roared, the room surging like a wave, with many standing to clap incessantly. Omar remained silent, her eyes looking far away. Jake Tapper looked at his watch, knowing the program had gone far off the original topic. But he dared not cut it. All eyes were poured on Trump, who had once again completely taken over the stage. Trump used her own past words to make her collapse before the public. When he sat down, the audience was still buzzing. Many shook their heads in disbelief at her past comments. Those sentences echoed throughout the room like an invisible verdict for Ilhan Omar. From that moment, Trump had not only won on logic, but also captured the hearts of the audience with the most potent weapon in politics: emotion. Trump sat still for a moment after the applause ended, his eyes gleaming with the calm of someone who knew he still had many cards to play. He slowly opened the briefcase again, turning to the next section of documents. He transitioned from statements to actions, noting that papers cannot lie. A soft gasp rang out in the room as Omar frowned, sensing a bad omen. Trump stated it was time to talk about the serious discrepancies in her public records. The room suddenly went dead silent. Omar immediately looked up, protesting that her private life shouldn't be discussed. Trump raised his hand to signal a stop, acknowledging privacy, but noting that immigration papers and tax filings were matters of law. He opened the dossier, pulling out a sheet of paper regarding questions surrounding her tax returns during her marriage to Ahmed Elmi. Omar was silent, a flash of confusion crossing her eyes. She admitted to clerical errors, but claimed not to understand his aim. Trump signaled the technical team, and a timeline appeared on the screen. It showed a complex web of filings involving different individuals and overlapping dates. Trump pointed to the chart, noting she filed taxes jointly with one man while legally married to another. He called it a violation of tax code, noting she was fined by the Campaign Finance Board. A murmur rose in the room as Jake Tapper looked around nervously. Omar insisted these were clerical errors and labeled it a smear campaign. Trump smiled gently, clarifying he was just reading public documents confirmed by the state. He highlighted the lack of clarity regarding the purpose of these unions and asked why she refused to clear up the rumors. The air in the room became stifling as Omar looked for help. Trump stated that while he wasn't confirming the rumors, the evidence made people suspicious, and she chose silence over transparency. He noted that records do not know how to lie. Applause rang out, sustained and serious. Trump softened his tone, acknowledging anyone can make mistakes, but reminding her she was a congresswoman. He noted she swore on the Bible to uphold the law. He argued that committing fraud to bypass the system was an act of betraying public trust. Omar took a deep breath, accusing him of slandering her without proof. Trump laughed lightly, replying that he had enough evidence to ask questions, while she had no evidence to deny them. He paused, looking straight at the camera, asking citizens if a person who lied about legal records could be honest with the country. That question spiraled like a blade deep into the silent space. Jake Tapper wanted to intervene, but the atmosphere was completely dominated by Trump. A few audience members stood up to applaud in agreement. Omar turned her face away, not responding. Trump continued calmly, stating he was there to ask the questions the press should have asked long ago. He declared he wasn't afraid of being called names for seeking the truth. He closed the dossier, looking like he had just won a chess game. He challenged her to prove she had nothing to hide, or else America deserved to know. Applause rang out again, stronger and longer this time. The crowd joined in with chants as Omar sat stiffly. On the screen, the image of the timeline still shone behind her. Trump didn't need to say anything more. He just smiled and thanked the audience. He had given her a chance to defend herself, and she couldn't. That night, when the program aired, social media exploded. Clips of the video and the images Trump showed spread everywhere. Although the full truth remains a subject of debate, in the eyes of millions, Omar's image was heavily damaged. As for Trump, he regained the initiative in the media battle. It all started with a thick dossier that contained the power of a fatal strike. Trump gently closed the section on the marriage controversy, but the room was still buzzing. He didn't rush to change the subject, sitting quietly for a few seconds. Then he looked up straight at Ilhan Omar, stating they should now talk about the present, where money and power intersect. He opened the dossier to another section, pulling out a thick stack of papers with the Federal Election Commission logo. He held up the documents, noting she would recognize the numbers. The atmosphere in the studio immediately tightened again. Omar tried to look casual, but her eyes were wary. Trump stated these were expenditure records from her campaign over the last 2 years. He noted her campaign paid over $2.8 million to the E Street Group. He pointed out that this company was owned by her husband, Tim Minot. A gasp rang out across the room. Omar gripped the microphone, claiming the contract was transparent and legal. Trump cut in, asking about the ethics of the situation. He stood up, walking toward the screen where a new timeline appeared. He detailed the timeline of Minette's consultancy, their respective divorces, their marriage, and the subsequent payments. Trump pointed out the pattern of hiring a consultant, engaging in a relationship, marrying, and then paying his company millions. He stated he could smell a self-dealing scheme from a mile away. The room erupted with whispering. Omar argued she didn't control the contract and that partners were chosen based on capability. Trump laughed with disdain, asking if it was the capability to write invoices. He noted over $780,000 in travel expenses, asking where they flew for that amount. The whole room laughed out loud, and many applauded. Jake Tapper tried to intervene, but Trump blocked him, stating this was about donated money. He listed the specific large payments for consulting and production, totaling millions. He argued no one charges prices like that unless they are writing invoices for themselves. Omar retorted that every expense was checked by the FEC. Trump replied she could hide behind the law, but not the people. He contrasted her claims of fighting for the poor with her lifestyle and payments to her husband. Sarcastic laughter spread across the stands. Omar began to lose her composure, calling the attacks sexist and personal. Trump looked at her, his voice harder than ever. He told her not to drag gender or religion into it to cover up corruption. He argued a male congressman, doing the same thing, would also be questioned. He turned to the audience, reminding them that donors were teachers and workers, not billionaires. He accused her of turning them into a revenue source for her family. The room exploded in applause. Many stood up shouting, "Shame!" Omar sat stiffly, her face pale. Trump turned back to the table, stating he never took a dime from the people to enrich his family. He contrasted his business background with her political career. Once again, the applause lasted long. Trump sat down, looking straight at the camera. He stated he just wanted the American people to see that numbers do not lie. He called the $2.8 million a fact, not an accusation. When he finished, the room was silent for a few seconds before ringing out with shouts. Trump sat still, while Omar sank into her chair. Every light and shout echoed back like a reminder of the power of evidence. That night, Trump made every defense of his opponent vanish. Trump sat quietly after the applause, his gaze sharp on Omar. The atmosphere turned cold and serious. He knew he had led the conversation to a point of no return. Trump put the dossier down, opening it to a section marked in red. He stated the most important thing was how she viewed the country and its enemies. The room was dead silent. Omar tried to force a cold smile, refusing to be a symbol of hatred. Trump replied he didn't need to fabricate anything, just replay her own voice. He signaled the team, and a video began to play. It was an old interview where Omar discussed a professor pronouncing Al-Qaeda. She recounted it with air quotes, questioning the serious tone used for the terrorist group compared to America. The video ended, and Trump let the silence spread. He asked what she just did when mentioning Al-Qaeda. He mimicked her gesture, noting she put quotation marks around organizations that killed thousands. The studio rang with angry whispers. Trump stepped forward, listing the death tolls from 9/11 and Beirut. He emphasized that these organizations were enemies who took American lives. He asked if she really meant to treat them as vague concepts. Omar tried to explain she meant looking at root causes. Trump cut her off, accusing her of justifying terrorism. He argued there is no root cause that justifies flying a plane into a skyscraper. He listed the atrocities committed by terrorists. He suggested if she didn't understand that, she had forgotten where she was living. The room exploded in applause. Trump signaled for another video of Omar speaking in Somalia. She was shown amidst a large crowd, hailed as a leader. Trump paused on the image of her, smiling radiantly. He noted she was a U.S. Congresswoman organizing a rally in a foreign nation. He highlighted her words about coming from the greatest country, Somalia. Trump turned to the audience, his voice heavy. He noted she didn't say she came from America or was a proud Somali American. He asked who she represented and to whom she swore allegiance. Omar defended her right to be proud of her roots. Trump cut across, stating she didn't have the right to put her old identity above her new nationality. He reminded her of her oath to the U.S. Constitution. He argued she couldn't swear allegiance to America and then greet thousands in Mogadishu like a prime minister. Applause and shouts spread across the room. Trump stood up, his voice animated. He stated that once you become an American citizen, there is only one flag to bow to. He declared that if she couldn't clarify her stance, she didn't deserve to represent the people. The room exploded in cheering. Omar tried to counterattack with claims of fighting for justice and peace. Trump blocked her, asking if justifying terrorism was humanitarian. He criticized her for attacking America while turning a blind eye to atrocities elsewhere. He called her logic sophistry. The entire room stood up, the applause sounding like thunder. Omar was silent, daring not to face him. Trump turned to the camera, stating people didn't hate her because she was an immigrant. He said they were disappointed because she forgot why she was saved. He reminded her she was brought here for freedom and safety. He accused her of responding with criticism and smearing. He called it betrayal, not gratitude. He concluded that she divided the country by making Americans wonder about her loyalty. Applause rang out again, louder than before. Some audience members shouted, while others stood with tears in their eyes. In that moment, Trump became a symbol of deep patriotic emotion. Omar bowed her head, knowing any defense was futile. Trump looked at her, stating no one forced her to love America. But if she chose to serve in Congress, she must do it with absolute loyalty. He argued Americans deserved leaders who were grateful, not those who treated the country like a mistake. The room exploded in unceasing applause. The debate was no longer a policy exchange, but a test of loyalty. The atmosphere in the studio thickened after his final words. The auditorium echoed with thunderous shouts. Omar sat silently, unable to hide the confusion. Trump took a deep breath, standing up to deliver the final message. He stated that what divided the country was not skin color, but love for America. He noted some loved the country deeply, while others despised it. He turned to Omar, his eyes sharp. He rejected her claim that he should be ashamed, stating he was proud. He offered a simple piece of advice to those who only criticized: love it or leave it. The room exploded. Cheers rang out violently. People stood up, clapping rhythmically. That phrase rang out like thunder. Trump spoke in a normal voice, but the words pierced through the screens. Omar looked at him, unable to speak. She shook her head, but the audience was no longer listening. The studio was swept away by the emotional current. Cameras recorded radiant faces and waving flags. Trump stood there, illuminated like a symbol. He continued, speaking of his life in America. He noted he had never seen America lose its soul. He argued that despite disagreements, people still loved the country. He stated that coming here and then saying America is terrible showed a lack of understanding. Applause rang out again. He mentioned soldiers who fought for the greatest country in the world. He contrasted that love with Omar's criticisms. He reminded her that the people she despised were the ones who voted for her. The chants drowned out Omar's attempt to speak. Trump continued, acknowledging America wasn't perfect. But he noted it was the only place where she could become a congresswoman. He repeated the slogan, "Love it or leave it." A long applause stretched endlessly. Cameras panned to emotional faces in the crowd. Trump stood straight, silent, like a person speaking the truth. Omar bowed her head, knowing she had lost. Trump was speaking to all Americans and their beliefs. The network witnessed him shake the nation. Trump closed his microphone, stating he didn't hate her. He just wanted her to understand the country deserved to be loved. He noted the door was always open for those who couldn't love it. The room exploded once again. People chanted the slogan like a vow. When the program ended, millions remained glued to their screens. The phrase climbed to the #1 spot globally on social media. Thousands of comments flooded every platform. Even critics admitted it was a powerful moment. Omar left in silence, while Trump walked out confident. A reporter asked if the phrase would be controversial. Trump replied that only those who didn't love America would find it insulting. The segment was replayed across all media. Everyone agreed the moment defined the debate. It set a clear boundary: stand with America or against it. Trump touched the spirit of national pride. The phrase became a new flag for believers in American greatness. After the debate, the aftershocks spread like a tsunami. The phrase echoed everywhere from news bulletins to cafes. Patriotism was awakened fiercely. For Omar, it was the beginning of a nightmare. Headlines declared her defeat and Trump's victory. Public opinion turned against her rapidly. Clips of the debate spread at dizzying speed. It was viewed as a political trial on live TV. Omar's image collapsed as protests mounted. Her office received thousands of calls. Local papers dug into her records. Even former allies expressed disappointment. Sources revealed the party could not defend her. Voters in her district began to turn their backs. Major donors withdrew funding. The FEC reopened files on her expenditures. The media rehashed every accusation. Omar failed to answer specific questions at a press conference. Her response about private family matters was mocked. Social media turned against her with trending hashtags calling for resignation. Her approval rating dropped to a record low. A rising opponent announced a run for her seat. Staffers began to leave her team. Protests outside her office grew larger. After months of pressure, Omar appeared in a video. She announced a temporary withdrawal to reflect. The press treated it as an unofficial resignation. Her career collapsed completely in less than 2 months. Trump became the center of the nation with the new slogan. The phrase appeared on merchandise everywhere. A newspaper wrote that Trump rewrote media history. Omar was left to watch the broadcast that ended her career. It all came down to 4 words: love it or leave it.